Renewable energy is it's energy generated by natural resources that can replenish itself quickly. And quickly is within our lifetime. Most of the renewable energy that we have comes from the sun. The other types we have is geothermal energy, and that actually comes from the core of the earth. And then we've got this wonderful body called the moon that spins around, and we've got this gravitational pull with this huge body of water that gives us tides. In terms of the amount of energy that we have that's been replenished on a yearly basis, we've got hydropower. So if the whole world relied on hydro, we could meet all the energy needs of the world. It's not going to happen because there's lots of technical difficulties. We got wave and tidal. If we could harness all that, it could give us everything we need for 1 or 2 times. Geothermal is 5 times. Biomass, which is trees and anything that we can burn and regrow, it will give us 20 times. And then we start getting onto wind. There's enough wind to give us 200 times more energy than the whole world needs, which is quite phenomenal. And then we get to solar energy, and we're at 2,850 times. The main types that we've got is direct solar energy, indirect solar energy, and then we have the non-solar. Some nice facts about the UK. It's one of the best countries in the world and probably the best country in Europe for wind resources. A quarter of all the wind in Europe is in United Kingdom, British Isles and the North Sea. All we have to do is harness it. Wind power contributed 18% of electricity generated in 2018. The cheapest form of energy in the United Kingdom now is onshore wind. And offshore wind is catching up pretty quick. So we've got now a standard wind turbine. You have a horizontal post coming up. You have a generator on top. Standard design now is using 3 blades. The blades are going around between 10 to 20 times a minute. Here in the UK is the world leader in offshore wind. The largest wind farm in the world is the London Array. There's another one that's just gone up in the north of England, which is slightly bigger, and there's plans for even more. The bigger the wind turbine you have, the more energy it catches. If you've doubled the size of a wind turbine, you quadruple the output. And it's more efficient as well. So economies of scale. To give you an idea of offshore wind turbines and the size turbines are going, this is being built in Holland, and you can see here it's not shy of the height of the Eiffel Tower. Its capacity factor is a lot greater because what happens is it can actually work in lower wind speeds. One turbine is enough energy for 16,000 houses. More things coming into the future. We're going to have floating wind turbines. The first floating wind turbine farm has opened in Scotland last year. The beauty about floating wind is as you get deeper into the ocean, you need to have more steel, more concrete, more cables, and more costs for actually constructing them. And then if there's a problem, you have to send a big ship out to try and fix it, which costs a lot of money. If you've got a floating wind turbine, what you do is you unhook it from the seabed, and you get a ship and you bring it back to shore and you repair it and you bring it back out again. In the North Sea, we've got absolutely grand plans for actually even building an artificial island, and you're going to have interconnectors between Holland, Norway, UK, France, Belgium, and the whole idea is to bring the cost down even more. Advantages: wind is never going to run out. It's cheap. It provides a lot of jobs, continuous jobs. It stops the reliance on imported energy into the country, and also it's actually a very efficient use of space. If you use wind turbines on land, you can actually still have sheep, and you can still have farms underneath. It doesn't actually interfere. And you can even have a forest underneath. Biggest disadvantage to wind is wind doesn't blow 24 hours a day, so it's an intermittent supply. Apart from that is a high investment cost for wind turbines. Visual onshore wind, you have people complaining about they don't like how they look, and that's why they got rid of onshore wind in this country. Pretty much was the main reason. Again, cheapest form of energy. Noise, they've got better at stopping this. Sometimes if you have quite a few of them together, you get this certain frequency of noise. And You know, there is a problem with birds, but surprisingly, the amount of birds that are killed compared to birds that are killed by cars, it's outnumbered. I think it's something like 50 to 1 or whatever. Si is the main ingredient for solar at the moment, which is sand. It's very versatile, it's transportable, it works in the North Pole, it will work in mountains, it will work on ships, anywhere that's a solar radiance. Solar technology is exploding. We've got organic solar panels now. We've got ones that use thin and monocrystal together, so they actually form a plate, so they increase the efficiency. These ones here are mono and polycrystalline, so 97% of all the solar panels you see in the world are going to be one of these two types. And then from here, you can get ones you can actually even manufacture into clothes. You've got ones that are clear, you can have glass that actually can be a giant solar panel, and you can get metallic paneling and the whole building can be solar. The price is just tumbling down. They've had the first unsubsidised solar park go in the UK. The price of electricity being produced by solar is cheaper than fossil fuels. All we have to do is figure out clever ways of storing it, battery storage systems. To give you an idea of the potential of solar, this area here, if we covered it in standard solar panels, is enough to power all of Europe. And this is based on old technology. Since then, technology has moved forward. We've got now concentrated CHP, and what it does, it super concentrates all the sun into one area, into here. You can also store the heat from this into molten sands, and you can run them 24 hours. Parabolic units have a glycol solution going in here. It gets superheated, and this then goes and drives the turbine. They use quite a lot of these in the States. You can actually have an electrical powered car. If you only drive it about half an hour a day, you can actually get all your energy without even having to plug it in. This is a house that we did in Cambridge. It's a zero carbon house. This building produces enough energy to run air source heat pump that heats the whole house. It heats the swimming pool, all the lights. When you work out the energy balance, it doesn't actually require any energy to run it. This is, where we need to move. Actually, I wouldn't mind moving here. It's quite a nice house. By 2050, I think about 10% of all the e-waste in the world is going to be solar panels. We need to be putting in plants to actually recycle them. Heat pumps, it's going to be one of the most important technology in the UK. All the different publications for how we decarbonise the grid and how we decarbonise the heating systems of the country, so many of them all come back to heat pumps. They run on electricity, and you can fit them anywhere as long as you got space. They've been using them for a very long time in Germany and Sweden. 3 main types. You got air source, water source, and ground source. How it works is a ground source heat pump. So what you're doing is you're extracting a little bit of heat from the ground, and this here is a air source heat pump. It actually gets the energy from the air. So what a heat pump is doing is moving low-grade heat, is compressing it, and then moving that compressed heat. So a heat pump is actually, it's a heat transfer machine. The hard thing about heat pumps is getting the sizing right. If the size is too big, your heat pump is not going to be running very efficiently. If you got it too small, it's not going to have enough heat to actually heat a building. And then to heat a building, it needs to have a building that has a certain amount of air tightness. So the first thing you need to do is you need to increase the thermal insulation, and you need to increase the air tightness. Problem with heat pumps is they're expensive. The actual units themselves cost a lot of money. To retrofit, you need to put in additional piping, you need to put in a buffer tank, you need to put in a new type of cylinder. So this all costs money compared to a gas boiler. The running cost, once you get a heat pump up and running, its running cost is quite low, because every kilowatt of electrical energy you put into it, you get 3 to 4 kilowatts of heat energy out. So this is the magic part of a heat pump. The fuel is electricity versus gas. Maintenance, it's like a fridge. How often do you need to fix your fridge? It's not very often. If you get clean energy going into them, they're actually 100% carbon neutral. That's why we're relying on meeting our future zero carbon Britain by using heat pumps. Some of the problems we've got: capital costs. Most buildings in the UK won't be suitable for them because they're not warm enough. They need to actually have the energy efficiency improved first. The design is a big problem. You can't just rip out a gas boiler and stick in a heat pump. There's limitations on the grid as well. If you put in a big commercial heat pump, it needs a certain amount of energy to actually get it started. Most heat pumps have a little amount of F-gas, which are 23,000 times more potent than CO2 in it. If anything happens to it, it gets into the atmosphere, you've ruined everything, the advantage of having a heat pump. Luckily, we've got very strict F-gas regulations in place in this country to actually deal with that, and people have to be highly trained to actually use F-gas, and they're homogeneously sealed. So not too much of a problem. And the other biggest problem we have is lack of trained installers. But once it's up and running, no maintenance costs, they last a very long time, proven technology, they're very safe, and also there's no combustion going on inside them. Biofuels, biomass, biogas, we use a lot in this country. Solid waste, we burn rubbish. It's not a very good source of energy. We've also produced fuels from biogases as well. In the future, quite a lot of the UK energy mix is actually looking at using biogases and biofuels. So it's a technology we need to keep an eye out for. One of the things about anything is it produces waste, it produces methane, or it produces carbon dioxide. It's claimed to be carbon neutral. In the olden days, the whole world was carbon neutral. People go and they chop down a tree, light a fire, cook. A couple of years later, 20, 30 years later, a tree grows back and they cut it down again. Now we've got a huge population in the world. We haven't got enough trees, we haven't got enough biomass. It's not the answer. In this country, we had the likes of some power stations. They converted to biomass, the Drakes, and they were actually importing wood from America. A lot of the wood they were importing, it turned out it wasn't actually sustainable as they were claiming it to be. And once you start working out the true carbon cost, it wasn't actually as green as people claimed it was. If it's used correctly and you've got certain types of rotational crops, it can work brilliantly. If you do it wrong, it's adding to the problem of the environment. Quite simply, you've got different wood fuels. You've got rubbish, which we use a lot in this country. We're actually building more incinerators, which I'm totally opposed to. You've got alcoholic fuels, you've got crops. They talk about like changing land use and actually using fast recreational crops, which seem to work quite well. Also then you've got some biogas produced by landfill and methane, and they actually stick pipes down and they extract the methane and they burn it. Used correctly in a lot of countries, it's great because it gives off a vast amount of heat. You inject some air to the back of it, and it super burns the emissions, and then you can put scrubbers on the waste air coming out, and it actually cleans it up as well. So done right, it's quite good. Not done correctly, it's absolutely awful. Solar thermal, probably the simplest renewable technology. It doesn't actually have to be direct sunlight, it can be warm air as well. You've got these collectors up here. These are evacuated tubes. They're a sealed unit. It's glass on the outside. Inside you've got black strips with some foil, and then you've got a glycol solution that goes in and out of the plates. And then some of them you've just got a heat transfer system up here where again the glycol solution touches the plates and it transfers the heat. It superheats it to 180 to 220 degrees Celsius. You go to Greece, you go to Spain, and they've got nice simple ones where they got the collector and they got the tank sitting right beside it. Nice and simple, throughout the day, heats your hot water, and then you get to use it. More modern ones, you can actually use these to actually preheat hot water for a heating system. So it works quite well. You can actually combine them with heat pumps. So you preheat your hot water with solar thermal, and then next thing your heat pump kicks in and it uses the preheated water as an energy source. In Denmark, they've even gone one step further, and instead of putting one or two of these on top of a building, they put hundreds into fields, and they have these giant water tanks built on their buildings, and then they use that to actually heat buildings during the winter. But you only need to have one or two solar thermal collectors for 4 to 6 people in a house. So you don't actually need that much roof space. Very little that can go wrong with it. Leaks is a bit of a problem. If it leaks, you've got to glycol solution that leaves a bit of a pink stain in places. But apart from that, once it's up and running, yeah, brilliant. Hydropower. They produce vast amount of energy, but they also have vast amount of problems. So you've got 3 different types. You've got impounded, run of the river and pump storage. And then you also got some micro hydro, which actually works quite well on small little rivers. Big problem with hydro, if you've got a drought, they're not going to work very well. Huge environmental damage in hot regions because dammed water, it stops debris. Debris and silt builds up. It forms methane. Vast amount of methane is actually released from hydro plants. So much so that the IPCC is actually going to change how it does accounting for hydro. And that's why hydro is counted different to all different renewable technologies. And also huge amount of damage for fish stock and population. And also then building it as well, the likes of some of the latest dams in Brazil, they want to build. It involves literally destroying vast areas of pristine rainforest and vast amount of concrete. Amazing technology. It produces more renewable energy at the moment than any other technology in the world, but it's kind of coming of age of actually how we actually use it. The preferred technology is run of the river, where you don't dam a whole river, where you do dam or you siphon off a part of it and redirect that to generate electricity without upsetting the rest of the river flow. Tidal energy, absolutely amazing. Seawater is 832 times denser than air, so it's got over 800 times more energy in it. You've got 3 different types. You've got tidal streams, which is very similar to hydro, same types of turbines. You've got tidal barges, and then you've got tidal lagoons. A tidal lagoon, you might have heard of Swansea Bay. Every couple of years they talk about putting a tidal lagoon in Swansea Bay. It got voted down again, saying it's too expensive and it's too environmentally damaging. After doing a bit of reading about it, it's a little bit questionable really. If you put in Swansea Bay and the Cardiff Bay, it would produce probably, I think, about 7-8% of the electrical needs for the next 120 years in the United Kingdom. Vast amount of energy. It's predictable, 2 tides going in, going out. And the United Kingdom, so I'll say British Isles, so also has Ireland in there, has the 2nd highest tidal range in the world. It's a vast amount of energy. So within the first 6 months, it's actually paid for all the embedded energy for the next 120 years. So in terms of energy payback, you cannot get much better than tidal lagoons. So these are some of the different designs we got going on here. You can actually go and create an artificial lagoon. Then what you do is you put in turbines that control the flow of water going in and out twice a day, so 4 times a day producing energy. Moving to the future, then you can even cover the whole lot with solar panels. This is a typical tidal lagoon proposal. I think there's about like 6 areas in the UK they're looking at putting these. But again, it got shelved by the British government. The government said it was £150 per megawatt strike price, which is very high. But if you average it out over 60 years or 120 years, the actual price comes down quite a lot. So it depends on which way the accounting was going on. In Cornwall, they're starting to use deep geothermal, which is you get a giant drill and you just keep on drilling and drilling and drilling down 3 or 4 kilometres. Then you put pipes down, you put water down, and then the water comes back up and the water temperature is raised, and you use superheated water to power turbines. Very simple. The hard part is actually the drilling down and the engineering that's going into it. Once it's up and running, fantastic amount of energy you can get from the ground, but there's only certain places you can actually use this type of technology. So it has to have certain type of rock, and it has to have certain characteristics that you can actually use deep geothermal. Where deep geothermal is actually used quite a lot is Iceland, New Zealand, Indonesia, Japan, anywhere where there's volcanic activity, where it's quite close to the surface. But again, there's only a certain amount of energy you can get out, because even that needs to replenish its heat. This country relies heavily on nuclear energy. This is the most expensive building in the world, so the price tag of about 26 billion so far. Add, I think, another 7 billion for decommissioning. I'm not too sure on that figure. It's a joint venture between EDF and the Chinese government are actually paying for this. We pay for it by strike price of electricity, which is £92.50 per megawatt hour, which is very expensive. Okay, so offshore wind is a lot cheaper. Onshore wind is about 3-4 times cheaper than that again. So renewables is actually cheaper than most nuclear. But what it does give you is one single building like this gives you such a vast amount of energy that it's like 4 or 5% of all the electrical needs of the whole country comes from, like, you know, one building. The disadvantage is you can't switch them on and off. You got problems with nuclear waste. You got problems of actually getting enough uranium. You got the build cost. The governments here in the UK, all the future plans all relies very heavily on nuclear. There's even plans in place to build small thermal nuclear reactors, which are kind of like reactors that you get in nuclear submarines and nuclear ships, and you can have them in towns and cities around the country. This is uranium, third generation. The ones of the future, we could have thorium, which has a lot of added benefits, a lot safer, except we haven't cracked that technology yet. And again, I think we're about 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years away from thorium reactors. So there's a big question about nuclear. If you go and get rid of nuclear, what are you going to replace it with, is pretty much the question. And the future, smart grids. All this intermittent energy that we're going to be producing, what we need to do is we need to balance it with our energy needs. So on a very simplistic level, we've got things called microgrids. So microgrids, you start putting them in Africa, where you have a school, a community, you have like 5-10 houses, and what you do is you put in a solar PV system and a battery storage system and a small little wind turbine, and all the energy you get, you use. When you run out of energy, you have some in your battery. Then when you run out of that, you have a couple of hours with the lights off. What we need to do moving to the future is having smart grids where different appliances, different industries as well, so heavy electrical using industries, when the demand increases, they start switching off different areas. It's all done by grid monitoring that goes on, nice and complicated, that actually manages everything. This is where computer whiz kids come in. Here we've got solar, you've got wind, and then it's going into your smart home with your little micro electricity that you're generating yourself. You got plugged into your smart car, everything's talking to each other. So this is the whole concept of a smart grid. And you tie it into interconnectors with different countries, and you got from a national grid to an international grid, and then you're starting to create kind of super grids. This is where we're moving to the future. If we can crack battery storage or storage of energy, this will work quite well. I'm coming towards the end now of where we start tying everything together. This here is from our friends in the Business Energy Industrial Strategy. This is looking at the future costs of energy. What we've got here, we've got our main renewable sources in the UK, which is onshore wind, offshore wind, and large-scale solar. Then we've got our traditional fossil fuels, and then we've got nuclear. It's the life cycle cost of a plant. So you work out everything from concept to building it, to putting energy in to run it, to decommissioning it and starting again. And you end up with this, it's called levelized cost of energy, and it's a very good way of comparing different energy sources. What we've got here is we've got nuclear. So this is the new water reactor that's going on. I think FOAC, it hasn't been tried before, so it's new technology. There's no case study that they can work from. Then you've got coal. Again, this is coal here, and this is coal combined with CCS, which is carbon capture and storage. This is a gas combined again with CCS technology. Then you've got coal again. So you've got your different types of coals, and this is a fast reactor as well. So what you can see here, quite simply, your renewable sources are actually cheaper. And as solar gets cheaper, the levelized cost of solar is going to be reduced with offshore wind as well. Once they get interconnectors in place, again, the price is tumbling down. This is quite a big major game change. Fossil fuels are now more expensive than renewable energy. And we've never had this before. We've always relied on subsidies. Everything comes down to balancing the grid. With an intermittent energy supply, if you overproduce wind and you overproduce solar, if you have somewhere where that excess energy can go to, such as pump storage systems, smart grids, electric vehicles. But the future, I think, is a lot of it's going to rely on hydrogen. And you can use that excess amount of energy using electrolysis, split water, and you've got hydrogen that you can store. Once it's stored, then you can actually use it sometime in the future, produce energy, and you can actually also use it at the same time for driving cars, or driving heavy goods vehicles, vans, trucks. So it's definitely a technology of the future. So combining intermittent supply of renewable energy, pump storage and hydrogen and a smart grid, we can actually we can get 100% renewable energy to run the country. There you go. Thank you. Whiskey time.